arguments and they resolve it. The flip side, in the majority opinion, is that basically this is a squabble between the other two branches of government, and there's nothing in the Constitution that says the judiciary has to decide it, therefore we won't.
How likely is the entire D.C. Circuit to take this case?
They might. Usually when you ask an entire court to hear it, it's a request en banc meaning the entire court. It doesn't happen that much, but in something like this, which is fairly noteworthy, if it's ever going to happen, if you're ever going to have the entire court want to not necessarily resolve this, but at least hear it, I think this might be it, because it really cuts to the essence of what the judiciary does. And let's say for a second they punt. In other words, they do not want to hear it en banc. You could appeal to the Supreme Court, but that resolves it as far as the district court's opinion is resolved. I think it leads to a lot of problems in the future where the court is not going to decide any problems that exist between the other two branches of government.
Well, how much is there crossover between this case and the three cases over Trump's financial records that the Supreme Court's going to hear at the end of the month?
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap, because when you step back, it really comes to the same point, which is, should the judiciary get involved in this squabbles, plural, between the other two branches? And for them to say it's not our job, it's like a plumber saying, sorry, you have a busted sink, but I don't do that. So we're kind of left in a quandary. If they don't resolve one thing because it's not their job, then start racking it up. They're not going to resolve any of these issues.
Well, that's why. Does it mean, if you take this to its logical conclusion, that the president's claims of absolute immunity are true?
Yeah, I can make a pretty good argument that they are true. If the judiciary doesn't do anything, we saw Congress punt recently and not wanting to do anything. So this whole checks and balances and equal branches of government, I think we need to revisit the reality of that.
It's sort of amazing, because what happened during the Nixon case, the judges heard arguments and made decisions about the documents there.
Sure, they got involved in the Pentagon Papers. It's a seminal case. History has dozens and dozens of cases where the judiciary got involved. The essence of the American judiciary system is that they will resolve these. That's their job. And so this goes back hundreds of years. And if we extrapolate going forward, if this is the new watershed moment where the legislative branch is going to do hands-off, assuming they like the president, the judiciary is just going to resolve, small little fraud cases and other civil cases, but not get involved in the politics of the day. It's a free-for-all for whoever has the executive branch. Whoever's sitting in the Oval Office, I don't want to say is acting like a king, but the only check and balance is a election every 4 years.
Well, it'll be interesting to see when the Supreme Court hears those three cases if there's a difference in their minds between the congressional inquiries and, let's say, the New York District Attorney's grand jury inquiry.
Right. I mean, the Manhattan DA has a case ripe for the Supreme Court to resolve it. And if the Supreme Court, a majority of conservatives, have the same view that we were just discussing with the district court in their 2-to-1 opinion, and the Supreme Court says, not our job, I think a reasonable person can ask, well, what is your job exactly?
Those are going to be incredibly interesting hearings, because you recall that when the Second Circuit had hearings over this, President Trump's personal lawyer said, when questioned by the judge, well, suppose he shot someone, using that old familiar, suppose he shot someone on Fifth Avenue, and President Trump's attorney said, no, you cannot prosecute him while he's in office, which is an amazing, a long way to go.
Absolutely. And there's a logic to it. You don't want the president distracted from minor litigation, some sort of, he owns a lot of property, obviously rent payment disputes or anything like that. That makes sense. But this is a man that golfs more than a professional golfer. He has time. So it's not an issue of that. So I think we do need to look at this realistically.
Also, even with some of those cases, it's just to his attorneys, to his, accountants. Sorry, missed the word there. To his accountants. So then that's another thing he doesn't really have to be involved with. We'll hear all about that coming up at the end of the month. Thanks so much, Jeff. That's Jeffrey Kramer, Managing Director at the Berkeley Research Group. And on March 31st, the Supreme Court is going to hear 3 cases involving President Trump's financial records. And the basis for each of those is different. So there could be a distinction by the justices. They could grant one and not grant another. They could grant them all or obviously grant none of them. So we're going to be following that closely, as well as any other news about whether or not the full D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, that'll be a majority of the judges will have to vote that they want to hear this case. And we'll be following all that for you. Coming up, Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly. Thanks so much for listening to this hour of Balance of Power. I'm June Grosso, and this is Bloomberg.
Mother's Day is coming up, so head to your local Asda in London. We've got a bottle of Assato Prosecco, was £7.50, now just £6. Thoughtful gifts, unforgettable prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Drink aware, 75 centilitres.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The famous 5 were discussing their next adventure to Bristol. Let's visit Clifton Suspension Bridge, said Dick. SS Great Britain, added Julian. The harbour, cried Anne. Dick jumped up. We'd better leave now. Bristol's so far away. Relax, said George. It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas. London to Bristol in as little as 68 minutes. So adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Fastest train from Paddington to Bristol Parkway. Terms and conditions apply.
Take the next left, take a right, and you've arrived at your Vauxhall retailer, where you'll find the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. Test drive now and you can take advantage of a £500 deposit contribution with 4.9% APR representative. Book your test drive of the all-new Corsa now. Vauxhall. New rules Britannia. £500 allowance provided as deposit contribution on qualifying new Vauxhalls. Conditional sale and personal contract purchase only. Subject to status, T's and C's, 18 plus Vauxhall Finance. Registered by 2nd of April 2020. Search Vauxhall Test Drive.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, streaming on YouTube. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week. It is Monday, March 9th, 2020. Carol Master, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. And Jason, it is all about the global market sell-off. Call it, I think you said, the 1-2 punch, a sliding crude on top of an already nervous market thanks to that coronavirus.
And nervous doesn't even begin to capture it in a lot of ways, especially what we've seen over the last 20 to 30 minutes of the session, reaching lows for the day. We'll see how it levels out over the next couple hours.
All right, first up, let's get a check on those market numbers. Charlie Pellet, where are we?
We are going to get right to the numbers. We've got the S&P at 2757. That is a drop right now of 214 points, lower now by 7.2%. The Dow is down 1,943. That's a decline of 7.5%. As Jason mentioned, very close to the low of the day. In fact, 2,046 on the minus side. That will be the low for the Dow Jones Industrial Average, down 7.9%. Again, on the Dow, it is down 7.5%. NASDAQ is down 557 points, a drop of 6.5%. 10-year, the yield on the 10-year, 0.49%. We've got gold down $1.52 the ounce. Right now, gold is at $16.73. West Texas Intermediate crude. Crude, a major story today, a 1-2 punch, as Jason put it. We've got crude WTI down 21.5%, $32.41 a barrel of Brent, $35.53, lower by 21%. Our market coverage continues. Our next update coming up roughly 15 minutes from now. Keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the very latest. Obviously, we'll be talking about the markets all day long right here on Bloomberg Business Week. Recapping, S&P down 214, now a drop of 7.2%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and as the man said, we will be breaking it down over the next few hours, looking at the market from all sorts of angles, from the economics angle, from the perspective of credit, from the perspective of obviously just the equity markets and everything that they're doing.
Well, stocks down, oil sliding, yields below 1% all along that yield curve. So exactly that, Jason. We're going to look at each of these individual market moves. It all tells one big market story, but each on its own also very key. And then we've got a top fund investor, love Kathy Wood. She's going to be with us for a long time. Her fund's still outpacing this year's broad-based sell-off. What she has to say about the environment overall, from biotech, fintech to Tesla and other tech innovation. That's her world. But we want to find out exactly how she sees it and where she might be finding some opportunities.
That's exactly right. And some opportunity that was seen over at Twitter, Elliott Management, Paul Singer's group, getting a win, it looks like, or at least a compromise.
Quickly, right? Getting
exactly.
that done.
They didn't get Jack Dorsey out, but they got a couple board seats. Scott DeVoe, he brought you the scoop about a week ago. He's going to join us and break it down. We should just mention stocks falling to a session low now. The S&P dropping as much as 7.5%, which leads us to setting the Business Week agenda. We've got the team here in New York. Dave Wilson, stocks editor, author of the chart and stock of the day. He's here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, as is Kriti Gupta, Markets Live reporter for Bloomberg. Dave, set the scene for us here. This is an historic day.
It is, and it's just flat out ugly, let's be honest.
We're now 18.8% below the S&P 500 market high. 20% makes it a bear market. Not quite there, but we're close.
That's sort of the general yardstick. And bear in mind,
are you saying if we get there, it's not?
Well, I mean, the real question is, does it keep going from there? I mean, is it definitive? And beyond that, bear in mind, 11 years ago today was when this bull market started.
March 9th.
2009.
Well.
Absolutely.
I actually saved the Barron's cover of them calling it, because that weekend Barron's called the market bottom. And yeah, right, when we just took off.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see if it indeed, what we saw last month turns out to be a market top. So that's still, out there as a possibility. But then beyond that, it's all about energy stocks. I mean, the S&P 500 Energy Index is now down close to 20%. That is the biggest drop since this particular gauge of the industry was first calculated back in 1989. Presumably, if you go back to the 1987 stock market crash, you could probably find, a bigger decline then. But even so, I mean, it's stunning. And the index itself is at its lowest level now since 2004. So it just goes to show you what Russia and Saudi Arabia moving as they did over the weekend to cut crude prices, it means for a lot of these companies. You look at the S&P 500, you've got a dozen stocks down more than 30%. Apache, the biggest decline in the index, lower by more than 50%. That's just staggering.
Right. And we understand the energy story. Creedy, come on in, because that's really your world as well. So tell us what we need to know as investors about what happened over the weekend and what it means.
Sure. So essentially this is, not to use this too strongly, but an attack on U.S. shale, right? They've been taking over market share since, I want to say, 2014, even before that. The big U.S. Booming shale revolution made America energy independent. We've heard that so much. And then now OPEC is really deciding to do something about it. And you can see that via this kind of price war. What's really going to show up here is in those U.S. producers. We've already seen them be in a very distressed sector, a very distressed situation. We were kind of hitting this the last time around in 2015 and 2016. If you look at your history books, when oil was kind of plummeting to 30 again, the last time around, these producers were really in trouble. And the way they got out was to issue more debt, was to issue more stock, and to access those capital markets. And this time around, that's not an option.
So is it a defensive or offensive move by what we saw from OPEC against oil?
I think
they, too, are in a tough situation. Certainly some of those Middle Eastern countries, because of the fall in the price of oil. That's so much, their economies are so dependent on that. And so that's been problematic for them.
That's right. And the big thing you have to notice here is that they actually do have some margin here to move within their budgets. Even if we do fall, we've seen Saudi Arabia need an $80 price level to manage their budget. For Russia, that's $40. For the U.S. domestic producers, not so lucky. So this is a very offensive move from that side of the world.
So, Dave, I have to ask you, again, as someone who has seen a lot of markets come and go, as someone who talks to investors and strategists all over the place, what are you hearing from people? What's sort of the tone? What are you reading? What are you hearing?
At some point, you have sort of the one side saying, well, we got to get a rebound soon. Things are so far out of whack. Then you have the other side saying, we don't know where the bottom is.
Right.
Basically, that's what it comes down to at this point. It's a real division of opinion, and you see it playing out on a day like today, where stocks tumble in the first few minutes, triggering a circuit breaker, basically halting trading for 15 minutes.
But that's to help keep it orderly,
right? And then stocks come back a bit. We've certainly seen in the last couple of weeks, midday, some relative strength. That's not unusual. But here we are again, kind of fading as the day goes on, and that's not unusual either, and that's an issue going forward.
Yeah, just looking at the Dow down almost 8%, 7.8%, the S&P right at that low of the day, 7.5% down.
You and I were talking about this in the newsroom, and this whole idea of we don't know what we don't know, and I feel like to some extent, the public is maybe panicking a little bit because I think they feel like they're in a vacuum and they don't quite know what will be ultimately the impact of this virus. So people get scared. That's just the way it is. And, we've certainly heard companies come out and say, we really can't even get our heads around the impact of the virus, right? We don't know.
Right.
Although we've seen some headlines of people bringing down, their numbers already. So I think that's the problem.
JetBlue withdrawing their forecast for the quarter and the year because they can't predict how it's all going to play out.
Too many uncertainties, too many unknowns, and we know that really freaks out investors. Kriti Gupta, thank you so much. Markets Live reporter at Bloomberg News, along with Dave Wilson, our stocks editor at Bloomberg News. Let's get to that bite of the day.
Let's do it.
A little levity.
Exactly. It's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number, $360,000. One of the last known copies of a video game console that never came to market, the Nintendo PlayStation, sold for $360,000 at auction. Video game collector Greg McLemore, who founded Pets.com and Toys.com during the .com boom, remember that, won the console, outbidding other collectors, including Oculus VR founder Palmer Luckey. It's believed to be the only prototype left of a failed partnership between Sony and Nintendo. Nintendo PlayStation is a common nickname for what was actually supposed to be a version of the Super Nintendo entertainment system that supported CDs. So many things in there take us back to what I dare say is a simpler time.
Right, and Canada reporting its first death from the coronavirus with a British Columbia patient. So that's just crossing the Bloomberg. All right, let's get to World of Nat with Bob Moon. He's in our 1130 newsroom right here in New York. Hi, Bob.
And Carol, as stocks Slide over the coronavirus and oil crash. The White House is inviting Wall Street executives to meet on the issues this week. We're hearing the date, time, and invite list are not yet finalized. President Trump's economic team is meeting to talk about suggesting emergency measures, and Democratic leaders are developing proposals as well. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has the latest from Washington.
The administration continues its upbeat tone, as Health Secretary Alex Azar exemplified in a brief statement at the White House.
The fundamentals in this economy are unbelievable, whether it's employment or wage growth or productivity or international trade deals. But the public health and protecting the American people is the number one priority for all of us.
Both the White House and the Democrats are focusing on workers who can't afford to take time off for treatment or who are laid off as their employers reduce output. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
A U.S. official says American troops have begun leaving Afghanistan for the initial troop withdrawal required in the U.S. Taliban peace agreement. The official said today hundreds of troops are heading out of the country and will not be replaced as the U.S. moves ahead with plans to cut the number of forces in the country from about 13,000 to 8,600. Former Democratic presidential candidate Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey has endorsed Joe Biden. Booker announced on Twitter early today that Biden will restore honor to the Oval Office and tackle our most pressing challenges. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Ferro enjoy each other's company.
Most of us don't speak Mandarin. John, do you speak Mandarin?
I do not speak Mandarin.
I just wanted to check that.
Almost as much as they enjoy grilling economic experts.
When this is over, do you bounce back, or is there a lasting weakness to it?
Which means that you will enjoy listening.
If things get worse, we're ready to do more.
Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT, G-O-A-T, acronym, stands for Greatest of All Time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Delayed at the dentist and now you're late for school pickup. You need a free now. Need to take the dog to the vet before lunch. Should have gotten a free now. Trying to get 4 kids and their baggage to the airport. Free now. Sometimes you can't get from A to B fast enough. Download the Free Now app today for quick pickups and reliable drivers, no matter the situation. Less hassle, more hustle with Free Now.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
At Asda, with our great range of beers and cider, it looks like you're hosting. Get 2 packs for just £18 or just £10 each. Like 12 bottles of Corona or 10 cans of Copperberg Cherry. Cracking brands, refreshing prices. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money. Live better. Selected stores subject to availability. Offer ends 18th of March. 330 millilitres each. Drink aware.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
The government has coordinated and streamlined its coronavirus messaging, but is it the right message?
What's really necessary is for the people in the government who don't know the details to stop telling us things like there will be a vaccine in 1 year. Stop it. That's not helpful.
Making sense of the noise and the silence on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Evidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. U.S. stocks bouncing along the bottom. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all experiencing massive losses as a full-blown oil price war rattles financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields plummeted. We've got the 10-year. The yield there, 0.51%. Crude West Texas Intermediate is down 22%, down $9.16 a barrel at $32.11. Brent down 22% at $35.27. The Dow now lower by 1,825. That is a drop of 7.1%. Minutes ago, the Dow had been down 2,109 points. S&P down 201 now. That's a drop of 6.8%. And NASDAQ is down 524 points, a decline there of just about 6%. 8.1%. So the S&P 500 index sinking the most since the May 2010 flash crash and is now down 18% from its February 19th record. Again, recapping, stocks lower, S&P down 203, a drop of 6.9%. Stay with Bloomberg for the very latest. Our next market update coming up in just about 13 minutes from now. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on Bloomberg Radio and also watching it on YouTube. Crude oil, certainly, and the energy markets, as Charlie just mentioned, one of our big stories. Oil slammed by a price war. Both Russia and Saudi Arabia stood poised to flood the market with cheap crude oil. It comes at a rough time because you've got the coronavirus spurring the first contraction in demand since 2009. So we are getting squeezed, certainly, on the energy markets and really the overall market universe from all angles. Ellen Wald is the perfect person to talk to about the energy markets, president of Transversal Consulting, senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's Global Energy Center. She's also a Bloomberg opinion contributor. She joins us on the phone from Jacksonville, Florida. She's also author of the book Saudi Inc. on the history of Aramco in Saudi Arabia. Ellen, what happened this weekend?
What happened this weekend is that Saudi Arabia and Russia finally caved to their differences and parted ways. This was a rift that had been growing for some time, and you could see it in the way that Russia was never really adhering to the production cuts that it had agreed to, and then at the last OPEC meeting in December, Saudi Arabia had to promise to make, and did make, some really significant production cuts when Russia was essentially agreed to not cut its own production. And then everything could have continued to limp along, except coronavirus came, and Saudi Arabia and OPEC wanted a significant response, particularly because Saudi Arabia was feeling the pinch. In fact, the oil that China was buying from it was cut by about 30%. And the problem was that when they went into these negotiations, Russia knew that Saudi Arabia was getting hit, and its position was basically, if you're the one that's getting hit from falling Chinese demand, then you take the brunt of these cuts, and we're not going to. And Saudi Arabia finally stood up and said no. And then they each walked out.
And the world is paying quite a price for this today, and certainly the global markets. Why is that? I mean, remind us, it's a very basic question, Ellen, but remind us why the world cares so much about the price of oil.
Well, the world has to care a lot about the price of oil because the world still runs on oil. Oil production is about 100 million barrels per day. China is a pretty big portion of that. It imports about 10 million barrels of oil per day. That's about 10% of global production. And in the United States, we like to think about it from the perspective of we're the world's largest consumer, but we're also now the world's largest producer. And so we need to be thinking about this drop in oil prices for more than just, hey, low gasoline prices, but oil production is a significant component of our economy, and this is really going to hit hard in areas that where fracking is a big part of the economy.
Right. I do wonder what kind of shakeup, this will have among the U.S. shale players or the global economy overall. I'm assuming that some of those weaker players, they just won't be able to exist.
Yeah, and this is a particularly difficult time to have a price and production war going on between Russia and Saudi Arabia. It's not unexpected. Times of high tensions can certainly lead to this, but there are players in this shale area where they were really on the margin, have a lot of debt, weren't doing so great in terms of financing, and this is going to push them over the edge. Right. Now, the upside is that if you're on the hunt to acquire some assets, you may find a very good deal out there. The assets aren't going away. The oil is still there. The oil will still be needed. It just might not be needed in the near future. We're talking about a year, 2020, where global demand for oil may actually decline. We were already looking at basically no demand growth. Right. But now we're looking at an actual situation where we may see a decline. But that doesn't mean that will continue for 2021, 2022, and so on.
Ellen, how much of this is just about the oil and energy markets, and how much of this is about geopolitical relationships? And I do think about alliances either China has with the Middle East or China has with Russia, because China gets a boost, as you wrote in your column for Bloomberg Opinion, from these low oil prices, right? They've got to import their oil.
Exactly. This is basically like a stimulus plan for China. China is looking at a situation where, it's going to have some economic problems getting things back going after the coronavirus stops to be a significant drain on its economy. And essentially, Russia and Saudi Arabia have handed it a stimulus plan. They said, well, that 10 million barrels of oil you need to import every day, now it's going to be a lot cheaper. And because before this happened, we could have been in a situation where China, has to import a lot of food, they have to import a lot of energy, and if they were in a very bad economic situation because of the drop in trade, what were they going to choose? Now they've basically made oil a non-issue. They can get their oil and they can get it cheaply. And Saudi Arabia and Russia are going to fight over who can sell China more oil and at cheaper prices.
Ellen, 30 seconds left. Just debunk the, hey, oil is cheap, gas is cheap, good for consumers argument.
Well, it is good for consumers, but only if you want to go somewhere right now. And there are a lot of people who don't want to go anywhere right now. So it is essentially good for consumers, but for producers, this is really, really bad. And at a certain point, it being bad for producers can also make it bad for consumers.
Crude oil futures right now down 24%.
Well, and your 5 worst performers in the S&P are all in the energy patch. Marathon down more than 50%. Ellen Wald, fantastic. Thank you so much for that context. Really the perfect way to start our show. She is the president of Transversal Consulting and also a contributor to Bloomberg Opinion. If you want to understand this, check out her column on the Bloomberg Today. She joined us on the phone from Jacksonville, Florida. Coming up, the eco side of this equation. We're going to get into that with Lindsay Piegza.
Check out that yield curve. The entire yield curve for U.S. bonds falling below 1% for the first time in history. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Selling pressure is intensifying again on Wall Street, sending the Dow and S&P 500 down more than 7.5%. Adding to the sense of panic due to the coronavirus outbreak is a full-blown oil price war between former allies Russia and Saudi Arabia. Crude is falling nearly 23% to less than $32 a barrel. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 2,074. The S&P 500 down 227. The Nasdaq Composite is down 590. Ford is down nearly 9%, falling below $6 a share for the first time in over a decade. A Deutsche Bank analyst questioned the automaker's readiness for an industry slump following a meeting with Ford's chief financial officer. The wealth destruction caused by today's market collapse is reshaping the ranks of the world's richest people. Oil magnates Harold Hamm and Jeff Hildebrand could find themselves off the 500-member Bloomberg Billionaires Index. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived in Philadelphia. Local time is 3:05 p.m. and the temperature is 67 degrees. At this time, you are now free to use your cellular devices.
You know that feeling when you get to turn your phone on after the plane lands? You can have that feeling every time you drive. Make sure your cell phone is stowed away whenever you are behind the wheel.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers. In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, it's Olivia Munn with my shelter pets, Frankie and Chance. Say hi, guys. When I adopted them, I discovered that they both have incredible personalities. Chance's sole purpose in life is to love and to be loved. Frankie is a little bit of a scoundrel and always entertaining. They're a little bit of a lot of things, but they're all pure love. Adopt pure love at theshelterpetproject.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council, the Humane Society of the United States, and Maddie's Fund.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba, please be done. Over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council. News without analysis is like half a bridge.
Why is the debt to GDP ratio still so important?
Those things, once they're set in place, stay around for years.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
And coming up, we are going to take a look at the central bank side of this equation, and also, as you mentioned, Carol, yield curve. What?
That, and I feel like, man, the bond market is just telling a very, very strong story at this point. That yield curve all below 1% at this point. All right, we're going to talk about that with Lindsay Piegza. She's coming up in just a moment. Let's get back to your top business stories and an update on that trading day from, once again, Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much. Let's begin with the 10-year. The yield there, 0.50%. Keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio for the very latest special coverage right through the closing bell. And, of course, we'll see how Asian markets tonight. Let me get right to the numbers. I'll give you the why in just a moment. Right now, the S&P 500 index down 225 points at 2747. That is a drop now of 7.6%. The Dow is down 2,046 points, a drop there of 7.9%. And NASDAQ is down 586 points for the NASDAQ Composite Index, a drop right now of 6.9%. Gold up 0.1%, 16.75 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude. Major story today, plunging 25%, 30.91 a barrel right now on WTI. Brent 34.29 a barrel of Brent is down 24%. So U.S. stocks extending losses as a full-blown oil price war rattles financial markets, already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Right now, again, recapping, S&P is down 228, down 7.7%. Nisha Patel is portfolio manager at Eaton Vance Management.
So you've already had kind of this major issue with the virus. You have the oil kind of price war going on with added fuel to it. And this is something that's outside of the control from the Fed and the government, I think, to some extent.
Another tough day for a lot of airline stocks. JetBlue withdrawing all first quarter and fiscal year 2020 guidance. Right now we've got JetBlue shares down by just about 2.6%. UAL, parent of United, plunging another 10.4%, bringing its year-to-date loss to 47%. American Airlines Group is down 8.5%. Southwest is lower now by 5.1%. So again, recapping, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all plunging on this back-to-work Monday, looking at a 220-point drop in the S&P 500 index, down 7.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, so we do want to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the bond market. As we've been talking about, the entire yield curve for U.S. bonds falling below 1% for the first time in history. This is after an all-out price war between the world's biggest oil exporters triggered an unprecedented global bond rally. Meantime, the Fed lifted the amount of temporary cash it's willing to provide markets as pressure intensifies for the U.S. central bank to tackle the risk of a worldwide credit crunch. There is so much to talk about with Lindsay Pieggs, the chief economist at Stifel Financial, on the phone in Chicago. So, Lindsay, nice to check in with you. Recession, are we in one?
Well, I don't know if we're in recession at this point, but we certainly see some of the downside risks that could potentially tip the U.S. economy into recession. Now, remember, some of the data that we're still seeing suggests that we were on relatively moderate footing, at least in hindsight, coming into the new year. The brunt of the pain, however, from the impact of the coronavirus, from the disruptions to the global supply chain, aren't likely to hit the data until the second quarter. So it's unlikely that we really have a true sense of what's happening to the U.S. economy until the April or even the May data come to fruition. So it's going to be quite some time. Right now, it's a lot of guessing, it's a lot of estimating, but we do see a significant slowdown in some of the key parts of the economy, which if continued, if the depth and duration of this impact extends, we very much could see a recession. Our base case scenario is 1 quarter of negative growth, so enough to push us in below 0% GDP, but not enough for that technical recession.
So, Lindsay, talk to us about the Fed's role here. The Federal Reserve, obviously not dealing with a lot of ammo, not coming to this fight with a lot of ammo, to say the least. What are they thinking about? What are they sort of turning over in their meetings, in your estimation?
Well, I think it is a little frustrating because when we look back going into the Great Recession, when we look back going into the 2001 downturn, the Fed came to the table with 400, 500 basis points of potential support for the economy. This time around, as you mentioned, we were talking about 150 basis points. So the Fed was already providing extremely accommodative conditions. Now, with the emergency move, the Fed said in part that was to ensure further accommodation, but also to help boost confidence. Now, it's unlikely that with rates already so low, an additional 50 basis points is going to have a meaningful impact on boosting investment and consumption, as it typically would when the economy begins to slow. But we do think that this increased preparedness, increased commitment to further support the economy could help boost confidence on the margin, or at least that's the intention, helping to sort of slow these knee-jerk reactions on a day-to-day basis to incoming data of the coronavirus. Now, obviously today bucked that trend, but the Fed is hoping that increased assistance to the marketplace will help provide a calm and help provide a floor. If, however, we get to the March meeting and the Fed decides to lower rates further, however, growth continues to deteriorate as we go into the second quarter, the question is, what additional stimulus does the Fed have left? They can provide explicit forward guidance. We can move into some sort of Operation Twist program or large-scale asset purchases. We also have negative interest rates, which are on the table, but the Fed has most often moved away from those. So we certainly will be talking about non-traditional metrics, given that the Fed has such very little wiggle room before we hit that lower zero bound.
How do you see the virus, Lindsay? Is it something that once we have the parameters around it and understand, that we start to see some containment, kind of get on the other side of it, when we get to that point, can we assume that we'll get a V-shaped recovery or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. Even if we start to have control of the virus, depending on how widespread the impact is and how many cases we're talking about, it may take us some time before confidence comes back to the market, before people feel comfortable traveling, before people return to offices and factories. So I do think that depending on the duration on the front end, that will very much impact the recovery on the back end. The faster we can get this contained, the more likely we will see a V or even a short U-shaped recovery. But the longer this takes, the more likely it is that the extended recovery period is quite a bit longer.
All right, Lindsay Piegza, thank you so much, Chief Economist for Stifel Financial, joining us on the phone from Chicago. I mean, this is one huge element of all this, and certainly one of the questions, as you said at the top, Carol, that the bond market is asking, and investors generally are asking, and politicians are asking, and everybody's asking about what role central banks have in managing this crisis.
I love when our economics team, Carl Riccadonna and his colleagues, talk about stall speed. Once you go below it, and just think about a plane. Once it starts to go down, it's very hard to do recovery. You really kind of want to, do preventive measures. That's what the Fed's trying to do. And that's the point, that once we maybe go into a downturn, it's tougher, I should say, to bounce back.
All right, stocks near their lows, climbing back just slightly, but bouncing around on those lows. Let's get to Bob Moon, World National Headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, such is life under the cloud of the coronavirus. At his news conference today, New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo alluded to the scent of hand sanitizer wafting over the room.
Very nice floral bouquet.
The state of New York is now in the business of making hand sanitizer.
What does it smell like to you? Tulips, yes.
Citing the price gouging that's been observed with that product, Cuomo today introduced New York State Clean, saying it will be provided to governmental agencies, schools, prisons, etc., as well as hotspots for the outbreak, such as New Rochelle. Cuomo also announced there are now 142 cases of novel coronavirus, or COVID-19, in New York State, the highest of any state in the country. But he cautioned strongly against hysteria, insisting this is not the Ebola virus. Federal and state officials in California are preparing to receive thousands of people from a cruise ship that has been idling off the coast of San Francisco, with at least 21 people aboard infected with the coronavirus. Personnel covered head to toe in protective gear today woke up passengers on the Grand Princess to check whether they were sick. Fences were installed at an 11-acre site at the port as authorities readied flights and businesses to flights and buses, I should say, to military bases or their home countries for a 14-day quarantine. The U.S. death toll from the virus reached at least 21. The number of cases worldwide has soared above 110,000. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability.
At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The government has coordinated and streamlined its coronavirus messaging, but is it the right message?
What's really necessary is for the people in the government who don't know the details to stop telling us things like there will be a vaccine in 1 year. Stop it. That's not helpful.
Making sense of the noise and the silence on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
You can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks are extending losses with the S&P 500 index now down 7.5%. That is a drop of 221 points. S&P now at 2730. A full-blown oil price war rattling financial markets already on edge over the spreading coronavirus. Treasury yields plummeted, crude sank more than 22%, and we have got credit markets buckling. Here's where where we stand. The Dow is down 1,999. That is a drop now of 7.8%. The NASDAQ Composite Index is down 580 points, a drop there of 6.8%. We've got more on the equity markets coming up in just a moment. The 10-year yield, 0.50%. Gold, higher by just about 0.2%, $16.76 the ounce. And again, worth mentioning, West Texas Intermediate down 25.5%. That is a drop of $10.51 a barrel at $30.74. Brent, $34.11 for a barrel of Brent. That is down now by 24.5%. Recapping, equities lower across the board. Our coverage continues. Stay with Bloomberg right through the closing bell. Then you got to find out how Asian markets fare tonight. S&P down 226, a drop now of 2.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
That's right. Around the world, we continue to go. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. So it is the worst day since Lehman for emerging market credit spreads. Meantime, the U.S. yield curve inside 1%, sounding the alarm for global bond markets. And according to our Peter Coy, the U.S. may already be in a recession. That was a story out on Friday. We talked to him about it. It was out over the weekend as well. Peter Coy, economics editor of Business Week. He is on the phone in New Jersey. Mike Regan is senior editor and lead blogger at the Bloomberg Markets Live blog in our interactive broker studio, along with Jill Weber, editor of Bloomberg Business Week. Mike, let's start with you. It's bad.
Yeah, it's very bad. I mean, you're looking at an almost 8% drop in the S&P 500 right now, about 7.7%. And the energy industry complex just absolutely destroyed S&P 500 energy companies as a group. Today alone are down 18%. That's the biggest drop for them in history. Obviously, it's all a result of what appears to be a price war going on in the global energy industry world, with Saudi Arabia slashing prices dramatically over the weekend. And really no bright spots in the equity market. Pretty much every industry group is down. It's just triggered massive risk-off moves throughout the markets. Really a historic day in the stock market.
And Peter, you were kind of all over this on Friday when you wrote your column about how the U.S. may already be in recession. Can you bring it up to speed today and tell us how you feel about it today?
Is it no longer May?
Right. Well, it's looking more and more likely, yeah. I mean, if the chain of events is you have markets priced for perfection at the beginning of the year, and the coronavirus hits, and it takes a while for people to wrap their minds around it. But one thing it does do is start to make people think that oil demand is going to be lower, so oil prices come under pressure. Russia refuses to go along with Saudi Arabia's requests to pull back on production. So what happened now, this is the trigger for today's carnage. The Saudis said, look, we're going to call your bluff, and we have lower production prices than you do. We're going to step up our production, crash the price of oil, and that will force you, Russia, back to the table. And what's happening now is that there's enormous collateral damage from this because, first of all, it's wiping out the shale sector in the U.S., which cannot tolerate these low prices. A lot of these shale companies are highly leveraged. They shouldn't be, but they are. And so they're going to be going into default. Any energy credit that was a BBB minus or something, barely investment grade, is going to fall out of investment grade, no longer be eligible to be owned by the firms, the funds that own only investment grade stuff. And yet there's no junk bond buyers who are willing to step up and buy. So that's where the carnage is coming from.
All right. So, Mike Regan, what are you hearing from investors? Is there real fear? Is it uncertainty? Is it all of the above? Like, what are people saying as you talk to them on the street?
The uncertainty is just overwhelming. I mean, when you see so many companies simply withdraw their earnings guidance, not reduce it or say, we're going to make 10% less than we thought, but simply
say, we don't know.
Withdraw completely. It's just a very unnerving thing. Liz Ann Saunders was on TV earlier saying, both the P and the E are in free fall right now. So it's just a very unique and disturbing situation. I think right now the big expectation is that the government, Congress will get together and come up with some sort of massive spending package to try to stop the bleeding. That's the hope anyway. That said, there's a big question of what exactly can they do? How quickly can they get it done? Will it be enough to sort of stop this snowball from rolling down the hill that's happening in markets right now.
Well, what's the help that companies need? Because I feel like you've got small business, which aren't in the markets,
right?
But maybe they're a supplier to a big publicly held company. You know, you've got consumers trying to figure out, some of them who have no safety nets if they can't go to work.
Right.
So I do wonder, like, what is the right panacea from Washington that makes a difference?
Well, that's the thing. I don't think there is one. I don't think there's a panacea. I think it's just how can you sort of stem the damage as best you can. And you're right. There's, it's whether it be in the corporate bond market, it's going to need propping up. The consumer, if there are sort of a lot of furloughs all of a sudden.
Right.
At the same time, the government has to try to stop the spread of this thing. So it's fighting sort of a war on 2 or 3 different fronts right here. The market is expecting something, even if it's not enough to really stop what we're seeing, at least to slow it down, sort of get a floor under this market. But, it's just a wait-to-see game at the moment.
Do you think Powell wishes he could walk back last week's cut?
I doubt it. I think he's going to be doing another one soon by the next meeting, if not before. So, there's a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking going on about whether they should have waited. I don't think it certainly would have helped if he had waited on that cut.
Peter, that's your world, economics. What are you seeing in terms of Fed and Fed policy?
No, I think that it was the right thing to cut then, and unfortunately, that's when you're that close to the zero lower bound, you just don't have that much ammunition left. That's just a feature of the economy we're in now, not the fault of Jay Powell. I would think that the Fed is going to do more than just cut. It's going to probably do a lot more forward guidance, maybe new rounds of quantitative easing. I mean, it's going to basically, people are saying this is not the time to keep your powder dry. This is the time to come in and put all your firepower to work to help this economy.
So, Joel Weber, as you put together this week's magazine, what are you seeing come in that gives you sort of a broader sense of this story?
I mean, we've been pretty proactive in trying to own as many different angles of the coronavirus story as we can. But then this weekend, I mean, the thing that I think, everyone was like, oh my goodness, was the oil knife fight, effectively. I think it's a knife fight. If you look at it through that lens, it's like everyone wants to get back Texas and the U.S. and shale for upending everything. But even to the point that OPEC Plus unravels and you've got Russia and MBS in a knife fight now. So it just feels like full-on knife fight. And these are not people that I really want to get in knife fights with.
Right. And I think it does raise the specter of this being a bigger geopolitical issue than just who's pumping how much oil. I mean, I think it just feels like a very tense geopolitical moment that relationships could start to sour over this, and oil might just be the start of our worries.
Well, we talked at the top about how China benefits by these lower oil prices. And we do know, China has certainly, in terms of its alliances, we've seen it moving closer to the Middle East and Russia as well.
Well, and Peter Coy, at a time, just 30 seconds left, when you've got a lot of people, big voices calling for global coordination. How likely does that seem?
Central banks can coordinate. For one thing, if one bank cuts and another doesn't, then the bank in the country that doesn't cut is at a serious disadvantage because their currency starts to appreciate, their current account deficit widens, and their economy weakens. So if for no other reason than self-preservation, I think you're going to see coordinated central bank rate cuts.
All right. A lot of phone calls happening around the world for sure. Thank you all so much. Peter Coy, Economics Editor for Business Week, joining us on the phone. Mike Regan from Bloomberg Markets here in our studio alongside Joel Weber, the editor of the magazine. Much more to come here on this Monday edition as we watch stocks bounce off their lows, but only a little. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
That saying?
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, we'll ask whether America is ready to elect a Democratic Socialist for president. Plus, the science fiction legend William Gibson on climate change and the end of the future.
How often do you hear the phrase, the 22nd century? Don't hear it. We no longer have that sense of cultural anticipation.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on a wild Monday. You got to stay with us right through the close to see how things shake out. Let me get right to the numbers. I'll give you the why behind the numbers in just a moment. Right now, we've got the S&P 500 index plunging 207 points. The S&P at 2764. That is a drop of 7%. The Dow is down 1,874 points, down 7.3%. And NASDAQ is down 545 points for NASDAQ. That is a drop of 6.3%. So again, stay with Bloomberg Radio through the close. And of course, we'll find out how those Asian markets react tonight with Daybreak Asia. The yield on the 10-year, 0.49%. Gold is up 0.2% right now, $16.77 the ounce. Crude oil, major story today. West Texas Intermediate plunging 23.8%, building on last week's losses. WTI, $31.46 a barrel. Brent has plunged 23% at $34.79 a barrel. So stocks extending losses on this Monday. Priya Misra is global head of rate strategy at TD Securities USA.
I've often thought that markets will continue to panic until policymakers start to panic. Now we've seen the Fed panic. We haven't seen much from the administration. We haven't seen much from global policymakers. I think the moment they come out and say, well, we've got a plan, at least they can sort of stem the bleeding. Now we have to look at the details. We don't have anything from the fiscal side.
Financials hard hit today. For instance, JP Morgan Chase has plunged 12.9%. Citigroup shares, they are down 15.4%. Bank of America tumbling 14.9%. Wells Fargo, among the big banks, lower now by 12%. Apple's iPhone shipments plunged more than 60% last month, according to official Chinese data, as the coronavirus forced the American tech giant to close doors in the world's largest smartphone market. Apple shares lower now by 6.6%. So again, recapping, steep losses for the U.S. stock market on this Monday, with the S&P down 209 points. That is a drop right now of 7%. S&P is at 2761. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that's a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. And Bloomberg Business Week brought to you by the Indiana Economic Development Corp. The business world is convening at the Indiana Global Economic Summit, April 26th to 28th. Visit estatethatworks.com to join the conversation about the future of the global economy. Carol?
Got to say, Jason, last night when I was watching what was going on in the markets, I did this short list of people I wanted to talk to, and this next guest was on that list. Dr. Robert Shiller is Sterling Professor of Economics at Yale University. We've been talking a lot about his recent book that was published last year, Narrative Economics, How Stories go viral and drive major economic events. He joins us right now on the phone. Professor Shiller, it is great to have you here. How do you see what's going on in the markets right now?
Hi, Carol.
Hi.
I think that what's going on has an obvious connection to certain facts that have come up. One of them, notably, is that we have a new virus that is contagious early, before it's detectable or diagnosable. So it's hard to quarantine people if you don't even know they have the disease. So it's a new problem. How do we contain this kind of epidemic? The other thing is that people are seeing how much international travel dominates these days. So the epidemic has, you've seen these maps showing where where it's hit, what countries it's hit. It's practically everywhere. So we have a pandemic. Those facts have sunk in and have been augmented by people's experiences of going to a grocery store and finding that all of the various products are completely sold out. So they know that something big is going on, and it's scary. It's also a situation in which people think, I might even die.
Right.
This is rare that it gets that bad.
And so, Dr. Schiller, when we speak of narratives, the narrative of the market today seems to be partially about the coronavirus, of course, but also about the oil market. How do you synthesize those two things into one story? How connected are they, or are there just two things that are really weighing on this market?
I think they're connected. People are traveling less. They're canceling international flights. So that obviously reduces the demand for oil. The oil futures market is really related to the pipeline, and we've got a lot of oil in the pipeline. So it's relative to demand. So it's a natural connection to see that. Maybe in a sense it's reassuring. Low oil prices benefit consumers. That's the plus side of this. But I don't think it can outweigh the panic from the COVID-19 epidemic.
So I think about your most recent book, and Bloomberg Businessweek magazine has made reference to it over the last couple of weeks as we try to assess what's going on in this market environment. How can that potentially help us in kind of figuring out what this means for the economy going forward? We were talking about, Peter Coy has a story that says, well, the U.S. may already be in a recession. How can that kind of help us figure out where do we go from here and how quickly we can recover from it?
Yeah, you have to. My book, Narrative Economics, was about the power of narratives, which are contagious like diseases. I had no idea that the coronavirus was coming when I wrote the book, but here it is, and it shows the power of contagion. Often crises appear seemingly out of nowhere. Disease crises. Why? Because somebody killed a bat in China, okay, and ate it, or something like that.
Right.
Caused some very modest beginning explodes into a worldwide catastrophe because of contagion. And that's what people are rediscovering right now. I like to talk about it in my book because we have not just disease contagion, but we have idea contagion, or spread by narratives, by talk. Most people don't talk about economics except indirectly through stories. And the story of this epidemic and its effect on business is extremely powerful.
Well, and it also feels like the story is so powerful in part because of the lack of information or lack of trustworthy information. I believe this is something you've talked about. I mean, that affects the narrative ultimately, right? The notion that we're having a hard time finding things to really hang on to create a cohesive narrative.
The problem with the narrative is that you have to develop, if it's a damaging narrative like this one, you have to develop a counter narrative, something else that has to be contagious. And right now we see contagious stories about President Trump's tweets, and that doesn't help.
Right.
I think we need narratives about heroic efforts to control the epidemic.
So if I could just quickly ask you, just got about a minute and a half left here. Recession, are we in one? Are we headed for one?
Well, we'll find out from the NBER, National Bureau of Economic Research, the recession date. They're slow to announce that. But I would guess that we're about in one. People are really pulling back.
Yeah.
Remember Roosevelt in 1933 said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. We're seeing a lot of fear right now.
And just have about a minute left here because the cover of Businessweek magazine last week was Larry Kudlow, the, ultimate optimist within the White House, and questioning whether or not the administration will come up with the right economic policies that are needed in this crisis. Just got about 50 seconds here. What are the right economic policies in your view? Are you concerned that Washington misses it? Just quickly.
Well, first of all, we need a serious response to things like the shortage of testing kits, or plans for how we're going to quarantine a large number of people.
Right.
And so we need that kind of leadership rather intensely right now. On top of that, there's also opportunities for fiscal and monetary policy. Obviously, those are things that have helped in the past.
Right.
And they can help again.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. As Carol said, one of the voices that we really needed and wanted to hear from on a day like this. Dr. Robert Shiller is the Sterling Professor of Economics at Yale University, a Nobel laureate, of course, the author of many books, most pointedly and most recently, Narrative Economics. We really appreciate his time. Spot on. And as he said, couldn't be more timely. Let's get over to some world and national headlines now with Bob Moon. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Jason. We've got you covered on the plunge in stocks and oil prices today. Here's the very latest for you in a roundup of other coronavirus developments. Fear over the epidemic caused a cascading shutdown of more sites and events, ranging from Saudi schools to Poland's annual Holocaust Remembrance March, and new restrictions on family visits and other containment measures touched off rioting by inmates at more than 24 Italian prisons. Here at home, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo cautioned strongly against hysteria. At the same time, he announced his state now has confirmed the highest number of cases in the U.S., 142. Senator Richard Blumenthal proposed today the government provide federal assistance for sick leave so small businesses don't have to shoulder that burden. The Connecticut Democrat also said he's losing patience.
We are truly facing an economic whirlwind without White House leadership capable and credible and experienced in the way that's necessary.
And today, word the White House is inviting Wall Street executives to meet on the issue this week. We're hearing the date, time, and invite list are not yet finalized. When he stepped back from the royal duties, Prince Andrew signaled he would assist authorities in this country with their investigation into sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. As of now, U.S. Attorney Jeffrey Berman says he's still waiting.
Prince Andrew has now completely shut the door on voluntary cooperation, and our office is considering its options.
Berman declined to elaborate on those options. Prince Andrew has denied knowing about Epstein's depravity. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. I'm Bob Moon.
Europe, stability, and constant evolution. Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Your job is going to be even more important, I'd argue.
Experience with consistent information.
Would it be a policy mistake if global central banks signaled a more dovish stance?
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
So how do you tackle that? What's your mechanism?
Weekdays at 1 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL Scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now, there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Global stocks plunge, oil in free fall. Let's head right over to the first word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here's Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. That's right. U.S. stocks are plunging today with the Dow down 1,850 points. S&P's dropped 206 and NASDAQ is lower by 545 points. The U.S. 10-year yield plunges to 0.51%. Oil had its worst loss since 1991. Small caps dropped 9%, and all of the main 11 S&P sectors are also trading lower, led by declines in energy, financials, and the industrials. Transports are down 10%. Semis dropped 7%, and the VIX is higher by 31%. Leaders to the downside in the Dow, Dow Inc., Chevron, and J.P. Morgan. Only Walmart was in the green. In other news, carnage in the energy space. Marathon Oil fell 47%. Apache dropped 46%, and Diamondback Energy was down 43%. Wrapping things up, Vail Resorts reports after the bell. Live from the first breaking news desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie.
Okay, I thank you very much, Bill. And to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thanks a lot. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Well, one of the people, we've been talking a lot about this, like who do we want to talk to that can make us smarter about everything that's happening in the world? This guy is on that list for sure. He has been our Sherpa of sorts through U.S.-China trade, and now certainly an understanding
of the
coronavirus,
right?
its impact, so many things. Andy Brown back with us, editorial director for Bloomberg New Economy here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. So here we are. We are weeks now, a few months into this coronavirus crisis in many ways. What have we learned? What can we learn from China?
Well, first of all, thank you for that very generous wind-up. So the lessons. I mean, this is the ultimate test of political systems. And we've all been waiting to see which system is going to perform the best. Is it the Chinese authoritarian top-down model, or is it the Western liberal democratic model? And on the available evidence, it is not at all clear that the Western democratic model has been superior in dealing with this crisis. In fact, there's quite a lot of evidence to support that the Chinese outcomes may be better.
You actually wrote in your column this week that the Chinese have bought the rest of the world some time because of some of the steps that they took, correct?
Right. So there was a lot of skepticism, as you recall, right at the beginning. Totally. Are the Chinese overreacting, locking down 60 million people? And then it was several hundred million people who couldn't move around the country. It turns out, actually, that measure may well have bought 2 to 3 weeks of precious time for the rest of the world to get their act together. Time, I might say, that in some countries has been completely squandered.
And so I want to ask you, before we get too far, about Taiwan, because you mentioned that when you first came into the studio, a country, a place that may have done better than expected.
Right. This is a very underreported story. I mean, Taiwan was probably more at risk from the coronavirus coming out of China than any other economy in the world, and has probably...
Why? Start there.
Okay. Number one, 850,000 Taiwanese people live on the mainland. 400,000 Taiwanese people work on the mainland. Last year, there were 2.7 million Chinese visitors came over to Taiwan. I mean, crisscrossing.
Right.
I mean, the backwards and forwards.
Right? They're just...
Right, and so you would have thought that if any country was going to really suffer, it would be Taiwan. 23 million people. In fact, it has been least scathed of any of Chinese neighbors. I mean, they've only had a few of China's neighbors. They only had a few dozen cases.
So why, Andy?
Combination of factors. The first thing is really key is they understood the risk. Okay, so I mean, this may seem intuitive, but when one looks at what's been happening in the United States, is clearly not intuitive. The reason that they, and not just Taiwan, but also Hong Kong and Singapore and a few other places in East Asia were able to understand the risk is because of the experience they had in the early 2000s with SARS. So they saw this freight train, coming towards them and jumped out of the way. The government in Taiwan reactivated a command center that they had used in SARS. They used technology and big data very intelligently. They linked their healthcare system with their immigration databases so that they were able to screen and monitor, potential carriers and, make sure that they were following quarantine directions and so on. But I think really, really important, politicians and social groups set aside their differences and worked together. And this may be the biggest lesson from Taiwan, which is that you can't tackle this coronavirus without a healthy society.
Well, is there something to be said for those nations that had to deal with SARS in the past, that they understand what can happen very quickly, and maybe that's where we're at a little bit of a disadvantage?
Right. So they'd seen this before, and they didn't panic, right? So, what you've had out of the Trump administration has been, Trump is not wanting to spread panic. That's good. I mean, you don't want panic, but you have to combine that with decisive government action. Right. And the public has to also know, and this is the other thing in Taiwan, individuals need to take responsibility for their own actions in order to promote public welfare and the common good. And that has occurred more readily in societies that had been through the trauma of SARS.
Well, it's interesting. Can I just say, because Bob Schiller was just on with us, and he said, what's going on right now, we talked about kind of the narrative or narrative economics, that, people know something big is going on, and there's also this fear that people understand that they can die. And so we're not kind of managing that well.
Right, exactly. And you see from the Taiwan case where you had early intervention, smart government, decisive political action, and a society that works together. You've only had, I think, one death and a few dozen infections where you might have expected literally hundreds of thousands or a substantial portion of the population. So in a sense, the Taiwan example gives us all hope.
Yeah. All right, so this is a very difficult question to answer in 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you anyway because, I guess you as like one of our great experts. What does this tell us about the new economy?
It tells us that we often assume that our political models, our social models, our technologies are the best. And in fact, there is an awful lot that we can learn from the new economies. Ideology actually wasn't important, particularly in the response to coronavirus. What mattered was political decisiveness and technology. New economies are very, very quick to embrace technologies and to put it to good use. And we've seen that vividly in the coronavirus case.
All right. I think he proved my point. He proved my point.
All right, he's our Sherpa.
Guy's amazing. All right, he's our Sherpa. Andy Brown, editorial director for Bloomberg New Economy here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. Coming up, we're going to get Dave Wilson's chart of the day. Can't wait to hear his song. And also Hillary Kramer is going to be along, and Kathy Wood. It's a bonanza of a show today on a tough market day.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week right here on Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are sharply lower in the final hour, barely above their lows for the day. The selling began at the opening bell, triggering a 15-minute trading halt minutes into the session. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 1,893. The S&P 500 down 209. The Nasdaq Composite down 550. Markets may be tanking, but deal makers are still doing what they do. Mergers worth over $43 billion were announced today, the most since November. The biggest, the $30 billion merger of Aon and Willis Towers Watson. And British supermarket chain Tesco is selling its Asian business to a Thai billionaire for over $10 billion. Oil fell sharply as Saudi Arabia and Russia dug in for a long and destructive price war. Each is now seeking to maximize the price pain for the other by producing as much as they can. Crude plunged nearly 25%, ending at $31.13 a barrel. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless. dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies. Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Hey, have you heard? The Mayor of London has launched his latest van scrappage scheme to help tackle London's toxic air. Small businesses or sole traders like me with a polluting van could now get £7,000, which you could use to trade up to a Euro 6 vehicle. And you could get an extra £2,500 towards running costs if you go electric. The scheme is now even easier to qualify for, and it's open to any businesses with up to 50 employees, like mine. So, I'm going to search TfL scrappage to see if I'm eligible and apply. You should do the same. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen